Alright, how's it going, everyone? Hope you're having a good morning or afternoon or evening, whatever time it is there. We are in day 7 of Nightshades. This might be the final day. We might make a longer video so that we can go ahead and finish this series. This next section is called Crisis on Demand. Initiation involves crisis. The countless rites of passage celebrated worldwide tend to include an element that upsets the candidate's personality, worldview, and position in society. It can be done by means of ritual. It can happen as life is good at providing opportunities for crisis, or it can be self-induced through trance and meditation. European pagan religions included plenty such like fun. When Odin hangs himself on the world tree, stabs himself with his own spear, and sacrifices himself to himself, exactly this is happening. The rites of Eleusis, E-L-E-U-S-I-S, people say all kinds of things, shook their candidates to such an extent that to this day we can't reconstruct them. The candidates, no matter how educated and literary minded, gave only a vague few hints and kept the central secrets guarded. People who consulted the death oracle and Epirus, E-P-I-R-U-S, spent lengthy periods in narrow cells deep underground and consumed formidable quantities of hashish. The poets of Ireland went through lengthy periods of training in secluded, windowless buildings, where they remained indoors all day and were only allowed to emerge from their dark cells at night. Like Taliesin, which means bright-browed, for those of you who don't know, like Taliesin, they underwent death and rebirth repeatedly before they emerged into the sunshine of the bright world to perform their office. Look into the Cauldron of Ceridwen if you want to know the story of Taliesin. In the Western European tradition, things were somewhat softer. Christianity provided no such savage ordeals. Explains a lot for its lay followers. And the occultists of the 19th century were not much given to such excess either. Much of Western occultism was soundly based on Freemasonry, which provided a few more or less symbolic initiations. These could be scary on occasion or just plain hilarious. But none of them remotely approached something like the classical Siberian initiations of shamans, which tended to begin when a candidate went totally mad and disappeared into the forest for weeks and months. Many did not return. Others remained physically or mentally damaged for the rest of their lives. Only a very few came back with a vision that allowed them to transcend normal reality, interact with the spirits of horror and disease, and perform healings. Nevertheless, crisis scenes were at least theoretically expected in Western occultism. Israel Regardie, discussing the progress of the initiate along the Tree of Life, comments that Da'at, also termed the dragon, can be pretty hard going. Really, Regardie said that? The fall, as a state of consciousness, is analogous to that condition described by various mystics as the dark night of the soul. This might be coming from the middle pillar. Or is it from the Tree of Life? I don't remember. Anyway. I'll just start over. The fall as a state of consciousness is analogous to that condition described by various mystics as the dark night of the soul. It is accompanied by a sense of intolerable dryness, a dreaded awareness of the fact that all the powers of the soul seem dead, and the mind's vision closed in dumb protest, as it were, against the harsh discipline of the work itself. Ellipses, ... And it will appear that the mind itself will run riot and become unstable, warning the candidate that it were better for him to enjoy a lull in his magical operations. But, as the mystics teach, if this condition be patiently endured, it passes, a higher spiritual consciousness gradually dawning in the heart and mind. From personal experience, the dark night of the soul has a direct purpose. Of course it has a purpose. What I mean is it has positive consequences too. Imagine your progress spiritually as a child. Everything's great. Everything's handed to you. You're carried around everywhere you go. Everyone's always happy to see you. People go out of their way to help you and avoid harming you. But the child has to grow. So the parent moves away, distances themselves from the child, removing the structure and the warmth and the presence, all of those things. Now the child has to reach. They grow. They learn to crawl. They learn to walk. They learn to run. They learn to jump. They learn to eventually have children of their own. All of this is due to that distance that is generated. I experienced, you might say, my second dark night of the soul, and recognized, I guess I will explain how I experienced it. I was fortunate enough to still have some astral capacity. That is to say, I still had some contact with the subtle plane visually, in my mind's eye. And when I looked around to see what was happening, what was going on, all I could sense was the presence of something reaching toward me. And it clicked. Yep, that makes total sense. It's time for me to reach. It's time for me to grow. It's time for me to leap. And I witnessed it as arms reaching, stretching toward me. So that is, for those of you that may be experiencing something like that currently, think about it as a training regimen. Think about it as, if you can't hear them anymore, you need to listen more deeply or for longer periods. Or you need to listen to a different frequency, tune to a different station. If you can't feel them, stretch, grow. You don't have to crucify yourself. I'm just trying stretch, grow, reach. If you're used to feeling your aura, your etheric force out here, try to spread it out a little bit. Don't spread yourself too thin, but reach. If you can't see them anymore, perhaps spend longer looking, or spend longer focusing, or stop looking at so many external things so rapidly. Moving on. In Regardi's view, the main point of the crisis is the urge to give up magic and spiritual activity altogether. This raises another idea. There are two opinions on this. The one opinion is that you are severed from all of these sensations and skills so that you seek elsewhere. You look for the spirits, the gods, your higher self in a different place. You have to move out of the box. The other opinion is that no, you're supposed to struggle through it and you're supposed to keep doing it. Perhaps it matters which way we're going. That part might be up for you to decide. You might not. Maybe it's that you're not supposed to know. But anyway, let's move on. Well, that's an important point of the journey. It's also an essential part of life. Urging to give up magic and spiritual activity altogether, that is. That's an important part of the journey. It's also an essential part of life. I would doubt the sanity of anyone who does not question the value of life and all the rest from time to time. As Zhuangzi, Chuangzi, it says after. First is spelled Zhuangzi and then Chuangtzu. Chuangzi put it so poetically, the torch of chaos and doubt, this is what the sage steers by. Translation by Watson, 1968. Mysticism and madness. Rigardi assumed that it suffices to endure this crisis, as it will eventually lead you to a higher state of mystic insight. As a psychological description, he was certainly making sense. Rigardi was a practicing therapist, and like most therapists, he spent much time waiting for things to happen. In our days, the chemical industry has gone to extreme lengths to convince the population that phenomena like depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, autism, hyperactivity, narcissism, and even completely silly and undefinable afflictions like borderline or psychosocial disorders are due to organic causes and should be understood and treated as diseases. Every year, serious psychiatrists invent dozens of absurd new mental diseases, including stuff like oppositional defiance disorder, which makes patients disagree with authority figures, such as psychiatrists. Interesting how that works, huh? Now, we're not going to get into that right now. We're not going to get into psychoanalysis and all of that. While mental diseases are invented by the dozen, the actual evidence for them remains slim. After decades of intense research, the psychiatric industry has failed at proving organic defects in the brains and nerves of patients. It has not stopped them from promoting a wide range of neuroleptics and antipsychotics, many of them with fatal side effects. Now, neuroleptics are not curatives. Their earliest advocates marketed them as a simple and clean alternative to lobotomy, removing a part of the brain. Their main advantage is the way they reduce information transmission and mess up the dopamine network. As a result, the patient turns into a lethargic, uncaring, miserable pot plant that is easy to handle in understaffed clinics, as well as a society that is detached. It is also very easy money for the chemical industry. Stopping neuroleptics therapy is often so painful that the withdrawal symptoms are worse than the original problem. Especially like benzodiazepam and stuff like that can be fatal. People who take neuroleptics for too long frequently develop permanent organic problems, such as brain shrinkage, dementia, tardive dyskinesia, appearing in badly aligned emotions, uncontrollable twitching and trembling. The hobo you see on the street may well be the victim of therapy. True. He may have long recovered from his initial mental problems, but the twitching will remain for life and make him an object of scorn and disgust. Briefly, the basal ganglia are most clearly damaged during the production of tardive dyskinesia by the neuroleptics. But the basal ganglia are also intimately connected to the higher mental centers, and diseases affecting the region ultimately impairing the mind. Tardive dyskinesia is caused by permanent hyperreactivity in the dopamine neurotransmitter system in this area. But dopamine is also the main neurotransmitter ascending into the emotion-regulating limbic system and frontal lobes. The lobotomy effect results from the action of the drugs on these nerve pathways. The initial studies of tardive dyskinesia showed that many and sometimes all patients were suffering from serious mental dysfunction, including dementia. These threatening revelations were literally in small print and in charts, and seldom were commented on. Breggin, 1993. Breggin. With regard to the initial problem, placebos score better than neuroleptics. In fact, in many patients, schizophrenia, mania, borderline, etc., tend to disappear on their own account when the patient gets care, attention, and support from understanding non-professionals, practices meditation, or develops some sort of spirituality. In short, what is conveniently labeled mental disorder in our enlightened culture happens to be a crisis of the soul, the identity, and the relation between the inner and outer universe. People with mental disorders are undergoing, one way or another, an ordeal of the abyss, to a large degree, a lot of the time. The disorder may be just the crisis a person needs to perform some much-needed identity adjustments. Now, while this might not always be the case, all too often it probably is. And the patients are given lifelong conditions to treat something. It's a permanent condition for a temporary problem, essentially. Okay. Asenath Mason, Asenath Mason, offers much fascinating and encouraging material in her occult study of melancholy. The black humor, a concept going back to the first Greek physicians, used to include a wide range of disorders. Where modern people associate melancholia with sadness, depression, and nostalgia, the Greek, medieval, and Renaissance healers believed that melancholia may appear as depression, grief, acedia, acedia, hysteria, madness, disordered perception, mania, hallucinations, insomnia, nightmares, introspectiveness, morbidity, anxiety, restlessness, distrust, delusions, and even divine frenzy. Old people, malcontents, degenerates, grave robbers, astrologers, monks, philosophers, sorcerers, and necromancers, all of them children of Saturn, were especially prone to suffer from this affliction. Interesting. The black humor was connected with the Saturnine temperament and with a strong urge towards spiritual experience. Excuse me. Man, that's good tea. Okay. Spiritual experience. Where was it? Okay, in short, what the ancients called melancholy, and what psychiatrists, doctors with 6 months worth of psychological training and the license to pill. Okay, let's be real here. Let's calm down a little bit, okay? I understand that some doctors potentially do more harm than good, but we can't just completely, rather we shouldn't, just completely throw out an entire, it's funny that I almost said industry as opposed to profession. We can't throw out an entire craft, class, study just because of some bad apples. Just, don't get polarized, That's all I'm trying to say. This is from his perspective. In short, what the ancients called melancholy and what psychiatrists, Doctors with 6 months' worth of psychological training and the license to pill label a disease turns out to be an indispensable condition of spiritual evolution, the dramatic phase of darkness that permits the essential purification and rebirth of the soul. People have a right to undergo crisis from time to time. In a crazy world where perfectly sane people wage wars, manipulate information, exploit the weak, and destroy the environment, an occasional bout of madness can be a sensible and healthy idea. That is, I do agree with that. Okay, the Qliphoth or Qliphoth in Victorian Age. Here we come to the modern Nightside researches. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn did much to popularize the model of the Tree of Life, plus a vast amount of attributions of deities, spirits, essences, symbols, and the like. Much of this was provided by Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers, who wrote the bulk of the Golden Dawn rituals and spent much of his life translating magical documents and medieval scriptures. Thank you. When he wasn't practicing sword dances or playing Enochian chess with his wife Mina, William Butler Yeats, and a spirit. This is from Howe, 1972. The Golden Dawn owed a lot to Agrippa von Nettesheim, or Agrippa. I believe it's Agrippa, yes. The Golden Dawn owed a lot to Agrippa von Nettesheim, to Abraham of Worms, who allegedly wrote the Abramelin, and to the anonymous authors of the various books that were called the Key of Solomon, the Goetia, the Armadale, and so on. You can say Goetia if you want. It even integrated a few highly distorted tantric elements, like the tattvas and the energy channels, imported thanks to theosophy. Look into Blavatsky if you don't know what theosophy is. The mixture was brilliantly innovative and efficient. Even modern Wicca would be unthinkable without the Golden Dawn Foundation. Aleister Crowley, a one-time member of the Golden Dawn, you can say Crowley if you want. Aleister Crowley, a one-time member of the Golden Dawn, you may have heard about, based much of his magic on this foundation. He made use of the Kabbalistic researches of his friend and mentor Alan Bennett, and extended them considerably. The result was a corpus of tables that attempted to equate Kabbalistic concepts with symbols, deities, tarot cards, magical objects, plants, animals, colors, and so on. It was a noble effort and much in tune with the comparative religion studies of the time, which implied that one deity can easily be identified with another if we ignore all offending differences in culture, myth, and ritual. I believe they're referencing Liber 777 here, so if you want to look into that. Initiates of the Golden Dawn were soon introduced to the Tree of Life and received lectures on its meaning all the way up to Da'at. Excuse me. The supernals, i.e. the states of awareness above the abyss, remained enigmatic mysteries, as none of the members of the order had personal experience of them. No Ipsissimus or Magister Templi? Crazy. Okay. Da'at and the Abyss were mentioned, but not practically explored, just as Regardie outlined above. However, the eager student did get at least a theoretical idea of the horrors of the Abyss when she studied the list of the Qliphoth, or Qliphoth, or Qliphoth, or Qliphoth. Here they encountered Keter Talmael, the two contending forces, Hokmah Gogiel, the hinderers, Binah Satariel, the concealers, Hesed, this says Ag Shekolah, there are many names for many of these, the breakers in pieces, Geburah Golachab, the burners, Tiferet Tegirion, or Thagirion, the disputers, Netzach Gorab Tzerek, the ravens of death, Hod Samael, the liar or poison of God, Yesod Gamaliel, the obscene ones, Malkuth Lilith, or Lilith, queen of the night and of demons, quoted by Regardie, 1978. Okay, This formidable array contains much food for thought. Usually, each cliffa symbolizes the reversal of the Dayside Sephira. According to Kabbalistic lore, the emanations of the divine appeared in a series. First we get Keter, or Kether, the crown, unity, absolute self, etc. It manifests on the day side, but as the original essence of the Sephira is so huge, not all of it can be contained. The overspill goes downward to create the next lower Sephira, but it also turns into the cliffa of the sphere, hence its night side representation. In this model, the night side tree contains everything that had no place on the day side. The Golden Dawn tree contains everything that had no place on the day side. The Golden Dawn attributions were still a little primitive, as they simply opposed the holy day side image to an unholy night side opposite. Where Keter is unity, its opposite is duality, quarrel, strife. Where Hokmah represents the word, will, and logos of the divine, the night side reflects as the blockage and hindrance of the creative flow. Binah is the true understanding on the day side, but its klifa is the blinding and concealing that prevents understanding. It is in this fashion we can work our way down a tree that is divine on the day side and evil on the night side until we safely arrive in Lilith's care, diametrically opposed to Malkuth, the world, the kingdom, the bride, and of course, Eve. It is a model with a strongly Judaic-Christian flavor and quite useless if we really want to learn something worthwhile. The trouble is the questions of good and evil. If we want to assume that the day side is good, we have to accept all sorts of things, such as conditions on earth, as good, and few are stupid enough to do so. Nor did it help the Golden Dawn initiates much, who studied the list and did not know what to do with it. Okay, so here's a little bit of something. Sometimes knowing is doing something. We take in this information and it assimilates and integrates into our soul, into our DNA, into our thought processes, etc. But there are more practical things that you can do with Kabbalah. And I'm not just talking about Tamura and Natarkin and Gematria and talismans and stuff like that. There are practical, pragmatic rituals and ceremonies that can be performed with the correspondences. You can think of the correspondences like coordinates, as well as other things. Like so many contemporary occult organizations, the Golden Dawn was mainly a theoretical enterprise, whose members were more given to talk than practice. Something about Western orders. It is unlikely that any member of the Golden Dawn actually made use of this list, apart from Alan Bennett and Aleister Crowley, who incorporated it into Liber 777 and extended the list of the Qliphoth, or Qliphoth. I have no idea if Bennett ever contacted the Qliphoth. Maybe he did not get around to it. He decided to quit early that Buddhism has more to offer than the Golden Dawn, and moved to Ceylon, Ceylon, where he became a begging monk. To each their own. In my limited knowledge, Crowley, though highly attracted to anything dangerous and dramatic, did not invoke the Qliphoth either. Really? However, he seems to have encountered some in a loose and unorganized way during the series of trances that form the vision and the voice. Now, somebody that was raised on skulls and pitchforks might have angels in their Qliphoth. The Qliphoth is related to excess and suppression and repression and unbalancedness. So there's a chance that, people see what they see. Don't judge anyone's visions, because you never know what their film is made from. Okay. The same might be proposed regarding his conjuration of the goetic spirits in the Boleskine residence. Now, you might argue that the infernal hierarchies of the Goetia, or Goetia, are not the same as the Qliphoth. That's speaking from a dualist point of view, where you have distinct gods, distinct demons, and distinct human beings, each of them appearing to be an individual. In, above, and behind the abyss, such distinct categories do not make much sense. Anyone can meet Lilith, but what exactly each of us experience will differ a lot. In my experience, Lilith is the sheer intensity of desire and fear, and the bliss of joy and passion that takes you beyond either of them. In her, you can meet and recognize all that seems attractive and terrifying to you. That, however, is just a small glimpse at many possibilities. For you, she may appear entirely differently. Gods adapt their form to those who encounter them. The name, Lilit, or Lilith, her Sumerian and Assyrian images, the mythical history of hers, starting with the Sumerian Inanna and Gilgamesh episode and continuing much developed in the Talmud, the Bible, and late medieval Zohar and the alphabet Ben Sira, Sirra, are simply representations that invoke an incomprehensible force, awareness, and open the dream gates of your visionary perception. What you'll meet and understand is unique. An absolute reality, gods, demons, ancient ones, totems, plants, people, tapeworms, and so on have no firm boundaries. They can merge with each other, assume the shape of one another, and remember their shared self-essence. Shared self-essence. Identity is a convenience. It works excellently in the world of dualistic perception, where I am I and you are you, where cultures differ, myths differ, and these differences can be defined. But it ceases to work, or even to matter, once you get to the source of all knowledge, to Da'ath, and enter the abyss and the realms beyond. Across the abyss. So the Qliphoth and the Nightside briefly emerged in Victorian magic, but were better left alone. Sign of the times. Crowley had a very similar take on this. He was obviously aware of the existence of the great unknown, but the few times he actually got involved in it, he got his fingers burned. And when he, as he claimed, crossed the abyss, he was in a desperate hurry to get it over with. So what if he conjured Karanzan one bonny day in the desert of Morocco and celebrated his birth as a master of the temple, a babe of the abyss, on the next day? It simply wasn't good enough. If you wish to explore your depths, you have to dedicate weeks, months, and years to the process. In fact, in absolute truth, you can never say that you crossed the abyss, as the abyss is an all-inclusive and good for many lifetimes of entertainment. Crowley's abyss experience, while far surpassing the efforts and achievements of the Golden Dawn mages, produced, I'm sorry to say, a brilliant but highly flawed supreme adept who spent the rest of his life being tossed about by fits of megalomania. I like to think of Crowley in 3 to 4 epochs or epics or periods. Aspirant, artificer, and adept. And sometimes it's hard to tell. I don't think there's really any order to these. But when I'm reading Crowley, I try to filter it through the lens of, okay, is he speaking from his aspirant phase? Is he speaking from his adept phase? Or is he speaking from his artificer phase? Anywho. The abyss isn't there to be crossed. You can't get it over with. As long as the concept of you exists, the abyss is everywhere. When you are gone, capital Y-O-U, the abyss likewise disappears, and distinctions like dayside, nightside, real, unreal, I and you cease to matter. When you returns, if only to live, work, celebrate, meet friends, or play with the kids, the abyss is instantly back again. Between. It comes in one package with the ego, the sense of identification, and is never more than a shadow's breadth away. Breadth. Liber pene praenumbra, channeled by Soror Nema, tells us the abyss is crossed by minutes every day. Not as a once and for all initiation, but in every bloody, wonderful day, routine, joy, or chore that is as essential as sleeping, taking a shower, making love, having a meal, or wiping your bum. And this is something that I've spoken about on the channel as well. You will cross many abysses, and you will find yourself back in many more. Every single time you come in and out of awareness, you're crossing an abyss, or coming out of an abyss, so to speak. Every time you come in and out of a very deep level of trance, every time you decide to redefine who you think you are, there are abysses within abysses. All right, this is the last 2 pages. No? Yes. Tunnels of the Qliphoth, or Qliphoth. Kenneth Grant was maybe the first pioneer of a contemporary magic to emphasize this essential idea. There is an odd and extremely short revelation by Crowley entitled Liber CCXXXI, which is not KKZZZ, it's 231. Appended to it are 2 tables with 22 sigils each. One table is entitled Liber XXII 22 Domarum Mercuri cum suis genis. It might be asked what it is good for. Maybe you'll tell me one day. The other is called Liber 22 Carcerorum Qliphoth cum suis genis, or genius. It is in its cheerfully sinister way, it looks a lot more promising. Both tables were obviously drawn by the same hand, obviously. To this day, nobody knows who it may have been. They don't much look like Crowley's work, nor do they seem to be the work of arch-sigillisator Austin Osman Spar. Grant speculated that they might be the work of Crowley devotee Captain J.F.C. Fuller, but how Fuller might have obtained them remains an inscrutable mystery. Why they were appended to Liber 231 is, at first sight, enigmatic. That the verses have some relation to the sigils was demonstrated by Kenneth Grant in Night Side of Eden, but this attribution is far from obvious or easy to comprehend for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. Neither Foley nor Crowley were of the sensitive and receptive cast of character that reveals a person's ability to transcendent the limits of the knowable personality. They were both, so to say, far too involved in the quirks of their egos to have managed anything like an identity dissolution worth mentioning. Careful how much we assume. They're probably right, but we got to be careful how much we assume. All right. Excuse me. They were both, so to say, far too involved in the quirks of their egos to have managed anything like an identity dissolution with mentioning. As far as I know, they never made use of the Qliphoth sigils. Hence, the origin of the Qliphoth sigils remains obscure. However, they were not to remain dormant. It was a breakthrough for Thelema and modern magic when Kenneth Grant systematically explored them. Others did the same, and much of their experience merged from Grant's significant Night Side of Eden. I've heard that book described as the most sinister grimoire of our time. You can say grimoire if you want. The most sinister grimoire of our time. And may have met people who kept it wrapped in aluminum foil, to protect themselves from its sinister vibration. Though it is anything but easy reading, the book turned out to be highly controversial. A good many Crowley followers would have preferred to leave the Cliffhoth well alone. Some accused Grant of wallowing in Cliffothic slime and excrement. You mean where the lotus grows from? Few understood that we have to encounter all sorts of mind-blowing, repressed, and unexplored material if we want to live a life in balance between the worlds. As H.P. Lovecraft's fictional artist Richard Upton Pickman declared, one must paint terror as well as beauty from life. Over the decades, a number of enterprising mind travelers dared to explore the tunnels of the Cliffhoth. Some, like Linda Filorio, created gorgeous nightside tarots. Some merely read up what Grant had written and tried to paint from secondhand descriptions. For a time, a nightside tarot project was in the making. I was asked to paint a few cards, Dagdagiel, Zamradiel, and Saksak Salim, and did it based on my drawings with an airbrush. The result didn't satisfy me much. It was intended that a number of artists should contribute cards. The few I have seen were widely different in quality and style. I have no idea how far the collection progressed before it mercifully slid into oblivion. Yeah. Next, a well-known occult artist declared that he would do the official nightside tarot all by himself. The process required a lot of talking and no astral journeys, meditations, or anything as crude as an actual practice. As a result, only a few cards ever saw the light of day. But nightside exploration continued nevertheless. A growing number of books purport to be the legendary Necronomicon, or the images of the dead names, or the names of the dead images. Something like that. From which Lovecraft allegedly quoted. Which none of these happen to be older than a few decades. At least one tries to blend ancient with contemporary elements. I'm not going to digress. I am referring, of course, to Simon's Necronomicon, originally published in 666 numbered copies, which combines Sumerian spells, Assyrian and Babylonian myth, Lovecraftian lore, and freely invented material. Good for them. Much of it highly poetic in a gorgeously sinister way. Unlike many foreigners, Simon was honest enough to hint very broadly at the material he was using, and even provided a satirical introduction and a bibliography. Nevertheless, his work is so impressive that many modern magicians take it for real. Isn't it? Other imitations were not as successful. As Lovecraft's friends invented their own horrible grimoires to quote from, nowadays these items have also been created, and there is a market for it. A growing number of daring magicians have dedicated themselves to the exploration of the night side. While many never get beyond the point of playing with fear energies, others, like Asenath Mason and her circle, make the crucial transformations and inflame themselves with the love and delight of the primal dark. So let's not get polarized and let's not blow smoke. I'm not saying they were, but many people do, and we have to be careful. So, hopefully, if you got anything from this, it's to take a different approach. Stop thinking about things the same way all the time. Start thinking about them differently. Anyway, if you stayed along in this series all the way to here, you may be getting a lot more than you realize, and you may be getting a lot more than people who have been doing this for a long time. These little bitty things, these little gems in these books that people don't buy because it's only 60 pages, they're missing out. Let alone the fact that there's plenty of visual material in this book as well. Anyway, that's it for this one. Have a good rest of the day, good rest of the week. Thanks for stopping by. Take care, and if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them below. Thanks.